Hi, I'm Rob from ProjectorCentral, and this is our review of Sony's new flagship home theater projector, the VPL-GTZ380. And it's a doozy. Stay right there. I've got to start here by saying that Sony's VPL-GTZ380 is not like any other projector we've tested. For one thing, it's a 112-pound monster that puts out 10,000 lumens of light. That's 2 to 3 times the output of today's brightest home theater projectors. It's a spec that's mostly seen among commercial large venue projectors built for high ambient light. So it's no surprise that Sony also sells the 380 to colleges, museums, and industry through its B2B display division. But what really sets the 380 apart from other 10,000 lumen projectors is that it's got the DNA of Sony's respected home theater projectors. That starts with a new version of the company's LCOS-based SXRD imagers. The 3 native 4K chips, one each for the red, green, and blue primary colors, are designed to handle the rigors of the high output. But they still bring the key benefits of LCOS technology, which we usually don't see in this brightness class. These include a high fill factor, which makes for virtually undetectable pixels at any viewing distance, and deep native black levels. Sony joins up the SXRD chips with a clever new tri-laser light engine that has 2 blue and 1 red laser. A blue laser and phosphor wheel are used to drive all 3 primary colors, just like we see in most single laser projectors. But Sony dedicates the extra blue laser and the red laser to bolster only the deepest blues and reds. So not only can the GTZ380 achieve the full DCI-P3 color gamut used for HDR, it can do it at full brightness. We confirmed this by measuring 102% DCI-P3 in the projector's brightest reference HDR mode using CalMan software. But it's not just the wide color gamut at full brightness that makes the GTZ380 different. The advanced signal processing is really what catapults this projector into the stratosphere, particularly with HDR. Sony uses its new X1 Ultimate for Projector processor, a pumped-up version of the X1 for Projector chip found in its newest step-down models. The chip enables some key features, most notably Dynamic HDR Enhancer. It uses frame-by-frame signal analysis and a combination of laser modulation, a dynamic lens iris, and pixel-level signal processing to effectively manage all that brightness. You can read more on this and the GTZ380's other advancements in our review at ProjectorCentral, linked below. Of course, all this high tech and performance doesn't come cheap. The GTZ380 costs $80,000 before adding one of Sony's 3 lens options, which range from $8,000 to $16,000. By comparison, the entry-level projector in Sony's home theater line, the VPL VW325ES, goes for $5,500. You could buy 16 325s for the cost of one 380. So let's take a closer look now at the Sony VPL-GTZ380. The GTZ380's box design is a familiar shape among commercial projectors designed for stacking and standard mounts. It's compact for its type, but not small at 22 inches wide by 30 inches deep and 10 inches tall. The 112-pound weight, excluding the lens, obviously calls for special mounting considerations. You'll also want to make sure that family members or pets can't injure their eyesight by looking into the lens. While the 380 is pretty quiet for a 10,000 lumen projector, it still generates noticeable fan noise close to its front intake and rear exhaust vents, and it can heat up a small room pretty quickly if it's not properly ventilated. All 3 of the lens options are from Sony's top-of-the-line all-glass Arc F series. I requested the short-throw VPL-LZ8008 to fit our small studio, and it works with the projector to provide powered zoom, vertical and horizontal shift, and focus. The connections are on the left side of the projector as you're facing the lens. Signal inputs include a pair of HDMI 2.0B and a pair of DisplayPort connectors. It's disappointing that Sony didn't include the latest wide bandwidth HDMI 2.1 ports. That might have enabled video games at 4K with 120 Hz frame rate from the new consoles. It's even more disappointing when you realize that the input lag reduction feature drives lag down to a very respectable 21.4 milliseconds at 4K 60. However, Sony does sell a license for support of 4K at 120 Hz through the DisplayPort connections. That opens it up for eSport gallery viewing or even 3D with 4K 60 Hz to each eye. Alongside the signal connections, the control ports include LAN and RS-232C, a pair of 12-volt triggers, and IR in and out jacks. A pair of B and C sync connectors are inactive, but there's a 3D sync for an outboard emitter. The USB port is strictly for firmware updates. You'll notice that the power connector takes a 220-volt input, which is required to get the full brightness of the projector. I used a 110 to 220 converter and it worked fine. Finally, the connection panel comes with a cool extra, a switchable LED work light. Although Sony is starting to also supply its excellent home theater projector remote with the GTZ380, initial units shipped only with the pedestrian wand sent with the company's commercial projectors. It's not backlit and lacks access to some key adjustments you get with the home theater remote, but it still has many useful functions. These include buttons for the lens controls, contrast and brightness, and the dynamic contrast and laser power settings. A slider on the bottom lets commercial users assign the remote to a specific projector and multi-projector setups, and a jack on the bottom allows a long cable connection to the projector's IR input in case you're working out of range of the wireless sensor. Now, before we get into talking about the GTZ380's performance, I want to acknowledge and thank Elite Screens for sponsoring our video reviews and supplying our studio with some great affordable screens. At various times in my evaluation, I used 110-inch versions of both a Cinewhite UHDB and a Cinegray 3D ambient light rejecting screen. The UHDB is a matte white material with a 1.3 gain, which I prefer to a 1.0 gain because it adds a little extra punch for HDR. The Cinegray 3D is a 1.2 gain angular reflective gray screen, and with careful projector placement, it's an extremely cost-effective ALR option for viewing in ambient light. Both screens are ISF certified for accurate color points, dynamic range, and color temperature, and they offer Elite's thin AON bezel for a nice floating aesthetic. You can read about these and Elite's other screens at the company's website. So I have to point out that a 110-inch image is small compared to the screens this projector is likely to get used with in public spaces or large home theaters. But one of the 380's amazing qualities is the ability to maintain good blacks and contrast even while it pumps up the highlights. This was true with SDR and especially HDR, and the modest image size only gave the projector more headroom to work with. Now, given the GTZ380's 10,000 lumen brightness, I should start out with a few comments about its ambient light performance. For either SDR, HDR, or 3D, there are 10 picture presets plus 3 customizable user modes. They're all fairly close to accurate. For bright room viewing, I settled on the bright cinema mode, but I cranked the laser output to combat our powerful overhead LED fixtures that brutally wash out most projectors. Despite the challenge, the image was satisfyingly bright with our white screen, though at the clear expense of contrast. Contrast improved on the Cinegray screen, but I came away believing that the GTZ380's greatest talents are really wasted in a bright room. On the other hand, watching 1080p SDR in a dark theater using the accurate reference mode starts to show what the GTZ380 can do. As you'll read in our review, I had to turn down the laser output to keep the black floor down on our small screen. But even with that adjustment, I still got good contrast with peak highlights around 50 foot Lamberts. Flesh tones looked accurate, whites were crisp and neutral, and skies were natural. Even with a Rec 709 color palette, bright colors looked punchy and saturated. 1080p content was also nice and sharp thanks to the ARC-F lens and the excellent scaling. And dark sequences were rendered with good shadow detail. Now, as good as the GTZ380 was with SDR, its HDR was at a whole nother level. The projector's sophisticated processing really helps it make use of the 10,000 lumen firepower, and I found I was able to keep the laser at its fairly high default power setting. I used the Cinema Digital Picture mode and I changed its color temperature to the neutral D65 setting to get a more accurate white. The result was an astounding peak brightness on the 1.3 gain screen of 528 nits. That's 4 to 5 times the output of a typical home theater projector. And the 380 did this while holding remarkably deep blacks for such a bright projector. Having that kind of headroom gives you incredibly visceral highlights, but without the usual blowout of detail you get with a typical HDR projector being pushed past its limits. Fortunately, the excellent color accuracy I enjoyed with SDR nature footage and flesh tones was also retained in HDR. And the wider color gamut made bright colors pop even more. Dark shots with bright highlights looked awesome thanks to the 380's brightness reserves. And even the most challenging super bright HDR scenes were well tamed by the dynamic HDR enhancer. All of this combined to make viewing HDR a spectacular and unique experience on this projector. Now, it almost goes without saying that 3D viewed on the GTZ380 would benefit from the projector's extra brightness. You need an outboard RF emitter that meets the 3-pin VESA 3D standard, along with RF shutter glasses. I managed to connect my JVC RF emitter using an extension cable, and then customized one of the user modes for 3D by cranking the laser to maximum brightness. The resulting images were brighter than I'm used to seeing, and had fairly good color accuracy through the glasses. So to wrap things up here, it should be pretty obvious by now that the Sony GTZ380 is not for everyone. But if you have the right environment to handle its bulk, the right size screen, and the right size budget, you'll be in for some breathtaking images and the best projected HDR you're likely to see in any home theater or commercial cinema. The GTZ380 is an incredible technical achievement and a deserving recipient of our Top Editor's Choice Award. As always, thanks for watching, and feel free to give us the thumbs up if you liked our review or to sign up for notifications on our future videos. We'll see you next time.